Samari Toure is a very interesting prospect or a person to break down in terms of trying to judge their actual opportunity presented to them by the Philadelphia Eagles and whether or not they got what it's going to take to make an NFL roster. And I have to tell you, the path forward, it's kind of complex here in Philadelphia because there's a lot of dudes vying for what could potentially be a fifth wide receiver spot or maybe a sixth if the Eagles decide to go that route. The bottom end of the roster gets quite competitive, and there's this whole looming issue kind of surrounding those bottom spots, which you have to ask yourself a very important question. And that question is, who the hell's the punt returner on this football team right now? I think that's a super interesting question with a few different candidates that could potentially make up give you the answer to that question. Samari Toure, this is a young man who, has got some semblance of experience in what we are perceiving. Keyword is perceiving. The Sean Mannion offense is going to look like. And he also has ties to New Orleans and Kellen Moore, which is also kind of a fascinating aspect. And not to mention, this is a vertical slot guy. This is a dude that's kind of shifty, kind of quick, and can get open down the field. An interesting player to break down in terms of the opportunity that's actually afforded to him and why certain players even make the decision. Like, why did they sign on here? Like, what is it about this particular destination that made them feel like, you know what? This is where I might want to, stake my claim, where I might want to try to cash in my chips to afford myself the opportunity to make an NFL roster. All right, y'all, I want to go to the tape, and I want to show you real quick just a play to give you some semblance of kind of what we're talking about today and who this player is, if you will. All right, y'all, let's get it. The Green Bay Packers come out in what would be an empty back set, guys, as you can see here. Basically, you got your running back split out in a plus alignment. You got another wide receiver to that side of the field. And then when we go to the short side of the field, if you will, just describing the way it's kind of laid out, guys. Technically, the center's in the middle of the alignment, so it's not really a boundary or a field, but you get what I mean. You have your stack. Just a few terms to know when we're talking about a stack, okay? To begin with, guys, we're talking about where's your inside wide receiver. So you want to identify your inside wide receiver. Where's your outside wide receiver in the outside of the part of the stack? And then who's running what we would call the point. Okay, that's going to make up your bunch, if you will. And then you got to know the terminology I just said earlier, which is we are talking about stacks here. So we have a reduced split on the left side of the field. And then we have a plus split with a running back on the right side of the field. The real interesting question here, and I don't know because it's just kind of where the video picked up on me. I don't know if the running back was motioned out wide. Did they come out immediately out here into this kind of formation? I mean, for the basis of things, it's not entirely that important, but it would just be interesting for my own knowledge to know. Guys, when you have this where you got a reduced split to one side of the field, a plus split to the other side of the field, that's just a mixed split. You probably could have taken a wild guess. That's what they call a mixed split. All right, taking a look at the wide receivers and just kind of the way they're going to run these routes to attack the leverage of the defense here. The point of this stack is going to split that cornerback and that safety on kind of a post route kind of ordeal here. And then the inside, that inside wide receiver is going to kind of go about it and run about a 4 or 5 yard kind of hitch, hook kind of action here, guys. He's going to sit the route down and kind of keep that defense stuck on him, which when you're on the outside, part of the stack here. So we're looking at this point kind of towards what Samari Toure's role would be. He's kind of running what we would call basically an in route. You could title this even a deep hook if you wanted to. This route, believe it or not, is really similar to the route that I showed you and the concept I showed you in the Devontae Smith video, right? Now, I'm not going to say the receivers run it differently. Obviously, Devontae was the inside part of the stack instead of the outside part of the stack. However, they're still playing from a stack or a bunch, and you can see the way that they're basically running a very similar concept, right? I mean, you could argue that, well, in one of them, you got Devontae running a hook, while the point man was running more of a kind of a deep over or deep in kind of route. Or in this one, they're running more of a kind of a post route. There's some little subtleties there, right? We ran a flat concept in that video to where this video here, you're running more of that kind of sit down hitch type route. I mean, yeah, there's some subtleties, there's some differences, there's more levels, if you would call it almost, to the Devontae Smith one. But you can see conceptually how they're not that different from one another. And that's kind of like to my point in the video about Samari Toure, which is, he's an interesting guy because he's got a lot of speed, a lot of twitch. He's kind of a weird combination of almost like if you brought Devontae Smith and Hollywood Brown together into a player, it would be Samari Toure. It's kind of the way like he sort of plays the game, and the fact that he has experience not only with like Kellen Moore, but more particularly, he's got more experience playing with the Green Bay Packers, so he kind of understands a little bit of the LaFleur aspects to the Shanahan system, if you will, like that variance that LaFleur brings to the table in the way that he pretty much plays this. So, I mean, it's interesting, right? I mean, if we're looking at guys that are long shots, this is one of the players that's kind of catching my attention right now. I think the other aspect to his game that has to be taken into consideration, right? Because we are talking about beating long, the odds, being a long shot that beats these really stacked up against you odds here, because the bottom end of the roster at the wide receiver position, it's pretty competitive, guys. I mean, you're going everything from Darius Cooper to Johnny Wilson to, Elijah Moore. And then you're adding in a guy like this who I do think has some talent. I do think you can't ignore the fact that like he does have experience playing in the system. He is a vertical kind of like slot type player that has some outside capabilities. I mean, you could definitely utilize his speed as a boundary side X to basically beat, players off the line of scrimmage with just straight up speed, a speed release. And then also the fact that this guy could absolutely be used as like kind of a motion and movement Z. But I think the thing that has to be really taken into consideration is that whoever it is, whoever ends up being on the roster, that individual has got to stick in the run game. I know we've been making these videos all off season, and it probably sounds like, man, like we get this point, we understand it. But I do have to say at the same time, I think it's an underserved point. I think that too many times people are not considering the special teams value of a player that's trying to make their way onto the bottom 53. And then also, schematically, you got to contribute in the run game in this system. I mean, there's a reason why we're reducing the splits. There's a reason why we're going to tight to formation. Those things are going to impact the play action game and the run game. And if you can't serve that as a player, I think it is problematic. And I will say, when I studied his tape, I saw a few things on the tape when it came to this young man. One thing I did notice, guys, is that he's not a huge guy. He's got somewhat of a body frame that reminds me a little bit of Devontae Smith, but he is all effort like Devontae Smith, right? I mean, even when you look at a guy like Mekhi Lemon's not a big framed player, but Mekhi Lemon's a lot of effort. Same thing. This guy is 6'1-ish, 190 some pounds, almost 200 pounds. He's not the biggest of frame, but at the same time, like, he's effort. And I do think that matters in the run game in particular, right? It's, you're working up to the second level. I mean, you're kind of on equal footing a lot of times with a lot of the players out there. Of course, there's always going to be an oddball 220-some pound safety out there. But, there's always going to be an oddball receiver that's 225 pounds like an A.J. Brown. But with that said, like, for the vast majority of these players, you're on equal footing, and it's really about effort and selling it. And I do see him working up successfully to the second level of the defense and being an active participant in the run game, cutting off backside pursuit and things like that. I mean, I do think this young man deserves a lot of credit for what I saw on tape from him in terms of the effort inside of that part of the game. And then I also saw when they were utilizing him outside as a receiver and they were kind of threatening the outside the hash marks, outside the numbers is really what I meant to say there, guys. When they're threatening outside the numbers with him kind of utilizing what we would call an outside release, so you got to sell it. That's one of the ways they utilized him in the run game, man, is that they scared people with his speed, and they just basically took that backside corner instead of to worry about trying to commit a potential player to him to block or whatever. They just ran him out of the play, basically. They just would go out there and they would, tell Toure, like, hey, man, just run this dude straight up out of the play. Just take him out of consideration for the play, and we don't have to worry about any of this. Like, just go out there and kind of do your thing with this, man. And that's what I saw from him is like, okay, like, I still think it's a crazy long shot, guys. I can't say that enough, that, like, I'm taking shots in the wind here of a guy who could surprise us in camp. With that said, hey, he does know Sean Mannion. He did play even with Kellen Moore. He understands the West Coast offense, and he understands this kind of concept and this idea of the Shanahan system in particular, than the LaFleur version of the Shanahan system with these reduced sets and the play action passing and the shit that LaFleur did that we're assuming, it's an assumption, guys. We don't know 100%, but we're assuming that that's what's going to happen here with Sean Mannion, is that there's going to be a mix of some of the things we did in the past, some of the things that made us successful as a football team, mixed in with the desire to be like Shanahan, and it being more than likely some aspect of the LaFleur side of the Shanahan tree. With that said, guys, that's what I have for you on this player, man. I do think that there's a possibility this guy breaks off a 30-plus yard reception in the preseason, and then everyone's going to be like, yo, look at this dude. This dude's definitely making plays out there. I could see him becoming a fan favorite just because there is a big play aspect to his game. But with that said, man, I'm going to direct you guys to some other videos because there's just too many guys to cover, and I can't spend all day on these people, guys. I wish I could. I wish I could devote more time to them, but with camp approaching us rapidly at this point, and the fact that we still got a few players to cover before we get into camp, some of these unheralded guys that I want to bring before you guys to talk about, I got to move on to the next player. But if you've missed some of my uploads and you've missed some of the players I've broke down, I'll throw you up a video here to get you ready for camp, and then I'll throw you up a video over here that will prepare you for camp. All right, guys, I want to take the time to thank you all personally for liking, commenting, subscribing to the channel. To all the new members of the Cerebral Football community, man, welcome. We're glad to have you here. And with that said, man, for all y'all that hyped up the videos, hey, it's greatly appreciated, guys. You only get so many of those hypes a week, and if you're choosing to spend it here, I do appreciate y'all for doing that, man, because you're going out of your way to help me out. All right, y'all. Peace. I'm out of here.